Danny leaned back in his chair like a man about to deliver a blessing. The leather creaked under him as he slid a crisp document across the glass desk. His voice was smooth, corporate, practiced. "You'll split your $280,000 commission," he said. "$140,000 goes to Mason. He's earned his share." I looked at the paper without touching it. The heading read, "Commission Adjustment Authorization," neatly formatted, HR approved, ready to be filed, just as soon as I gave them what they thought they were owed my quiet compliance. I laughed, not a polite chuckle or a half-hearted smirk, a real laugh, loud, full-bodied. It burst from me like pressure releasing from a valve, echoing off the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Chicago skyline. For a second, I swear even the receptionist 2 rooms over paused her typing. Danny blinked. "Is something funny?" I reached into my briefcase, still laughing, and pulled out a folder with Avalon Group's logo embossed in silver foil. I slid it across the desk, placing it directly on top of his commission form. "Before we talk about splits," I said, calmly, "you might want to review Clause 8.3 in this agreement." Danny opened the folder, his smirk evaporating. Inside was the final contract signed last week, not by him, not by Varelia Motors, but by me and Selma Arroyo, Avalon's CEO. It was a private consulting agreement, negotiated and executed separately from the dealership's internal commission system. Clause 8.3 stated, in black and white legalese, that Varelia was listed as a third-party vehicle supplier, only not a sales stakeholder. The entire $10.8 million transaction had been brokered through my independent strategy consultancy, filed with the state of Illinois just 4 months ago. Danny's skin drained of color. "You bypassed, I protected myself," I said, folding my hands. I saw how things were headed. The celebration without my name, the intern who suddenly led strategy, the commission changes made without my consent. I leaned forward, voice even. "You wanted the money, Danny." But I kept the deal. He opened his mouth, closed it again. The paper in his hand trembled slightly. I stood. "I'll give you until Friday to correct the payroll. After that, the next person reading Clause 8.3 will be your lawyer." And with that, I turned and walked out of his office, leaving behind one unsigned form and an unraveling lie. 7 years. That's how long I gave to Varelia Motors each year, folded neatly into the next. Like a pressed suit, no one cared to notice. I closed more deals than anyone in my division for 5 of those years. Coached 3 junior associates who now had regional manager titles. Listened to their speeches at quarterly meetings as they quoted ideas I'd first floated over lukewarm coffee and late-night slide decks. I sold $9 million worth of luxury vehicles that somehow always became someone else's milestone, someone else's applause. I never shouted, never made scenes. I stayed late, smiled through being talked over, corrected mistakes behind the scenes without asking for credit. I was the cleanup crew and the architect, and they liked me best when I was invisible. At home, things were even quieter. My mother, Noreen, was a public school literature teacher for 34 years before the stroke. These days, she spent her afternoons in a motorized wheelchair by the living room window, marking old essays in pencil out of habit. Her voice was softer now, but her eyes still sharp, still knowing. Our apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, beige walls that absorbed every anxiety I carried through the door. The Avalon deal changed that, or was supposed to. For the first time in years, I saw a future that didn't involve rationing medications, negotiating payment plans, or calculating which utility could be late without a shutoff notice at midnight while Noreen slept. I spread out spreadsheets across the kitchen table, the edge of the laminate peeling from the corners. Medical invoices sat beside fleet delivery schedules. I balanced budgets with one hand and outlined Mason's pattern of interference with the other. This deal wasn't a number. It was a way out, a chance to breathe, a chance to pay back the woman who raised me on lesson plans and quiet resilience, a chance to leave the whisper of erasure behind. So when Danny and Mason tried to rebrand my work as theirs, they weren't just coming for my money. They were coming for my mother's dignity. And I knew exactly how to stop them. Mason Hale arrived 6 months ago like a puff of cologne and overconfidence, the kind of kid who wore designer loafers to a Tuesday meeting and dropped names like they were paperweights. Within a week, he was calling Danny D like they'd shared war stories instead of LinkedIn endorsements. Everyone could see the favoritism. Danny introduced him at our weekly sales huddle like he was some prodigy of disruption. "He thinks differently," he said once. As Mason used the term synergistic bandwidth in a conversation about lease paperwork, I ignored it at first. Interns come and go, and most burn out when the first commission check doesn't match their Instagram lifestyle. But Mason stuck. He lingered in meetings, nodded emphatically at things he didn't understand, and started hovering near my desk whenever I was on calls, especially the Avalon ones. I kept my voice even, used generic phrasing when I could, but I noticed him listening harder whenever I mentioned custom trim specs or long-term servicing plans. He'd pace nearby, pretending to read brochures or check his phone, always just close enough. Then, during a Monday team sync, Mason leaned forward in front of 10 staff and said, "What if we offer Avalon the cross-tiered warranty bundle with in-house concierge pickup? It aligns with their executive fleet expectations." I froze. That was the exact phrasing I'd used with Selma on our last call privately, from the conference room, with the door closed. Danny beamed. "That's the kind of forward thinking we need," he said, already typing something into his iPad. The others clapped. I didn't say a word, just sat there while Mason grinned across the table like he'd invented the concept of premium aftercare. Like those specs hadn't come from my hands, my notes, my sleepless nights reading Avalon's internal service reviews. That was the first time I knew he wasn't just clueless. He was watching. He was listening. And he was playing a game I had no intention of losing. I got the message during lunch, a short email from Selma Arroyo, Avalon's CEO, titled simply, "Following Up." I opened it while stirring creamer into my coffee, not expecting anything unusual. Inside was a forwarded thread, and in it, Mason's name stared back at me like a rotten cherry on top of a familiar mess. He had reached out to Selma directly, scheduled a private call without looping me in, claimed he was exploring more agile vendor options and wanted to ensure continuity in case of internal transitions. Then, like a casual afterthought, he dropped the bomb. "Given that Celeste may be leaving Varelia soon, we think it's smart to get ahead of any disruption. My cousin's dealership in Atlanta has fleet capacity and direct financing flexibility. We could reroute the build." My pulse didn't spike. It slowed. A cold stillness settled in my spine as I reread the sentence again and again. Not content with stealing credit, he was trying to steal the client, to hijack the contract entirely and shift it to a business tied to his own family, and his justification, me, about to quit. Selma's response was brisk and brilliant. She declined, politely but firmly, told him the deal was moving forward as agreed, with me as point of contact. Then she closed with, "Please ensure any future proposals are routed through Celeste Whitmore directly," as if to remind him gently who the professional was. And then she forwarded me the entire exchange. No commentary, just a digital shrug and a subject line that said, "You might want to see this." I sat still for a long time after reading it, not from shock, from clarity. Mason wasn't just freeloading. He wasn't just copying notes. He was laying groundwork to erase me entirely, selling a narrative that I was unstable, replaceable, already fading into the background. It wasn't just the deal he wanted. It was the seat I built for myself, the one no one handed me, the one I never stopped earning. I closed the email and opened a blank document. I had evidence to collect. The folding chairs were set up in rows across the main showroom, between two of our flashiest new models gleaming under spotlights, like we were launching a tech product, not selling cars. I sat near the back, sipping lukewarm coffee, expecting a standard sales roundup. Then Danny stepped onto a small riser someone had dragged over from the service bay. He clapped his hands together once. Let's celebrate the Avalon win. A few heads turned toward me. I smiled softly, nodded. My pulse stayed steady. This deal, Danny continued, is the biggest corporate fleet transaction in Verelia's history. 10.8 million in executive class builds, custom warranties, concierge servicing. It's not just a win, it's a statement. He paused for effect. I waited for my name. Mason Hale led the strategic side of this project. He said, from account alignment to fleet customization, Celeste supported execution and operations. The words hit like glass cracking in the cold. Applause broke out, loud, sustained. Some people even stood. Mason grinned, chin tilted, hands pressed together like he was too humble to enjoy it, but not enough to stop it. I didn't move. I stared at Danny, then at Mason, then down at my own hands. Strategic side. Supported execution? 6 months of building trust with Avalon? 32 client calls? 3 in-person site visits? 27 vehicle configuration plans? My mother's prescriptions delayed so I could cover travel costs. All of it. Rebranded. Later that afternoon, an email landed in my inbox titled, Commission Schedule Q2 Update. I opened it. 2 names on the spreadsheet: lead strategist M, Hale 50% share sales support C, Whitmore 50% share sales support. No one had spoken to me. No discussion, no explanation. Just numbers entered in a system that would soon pay him half of what I'd built alone. I didn't respond. I didn't go to HR. I didn't bang on Danny's door. Instead, I printed the document, folded it neatly, and added it to my growing folder. Let them think they'd won. Let them clap. I was done asking for credit. Now I was preparing to take it back. I smiled. I nodded. I even thanked them. My applause was gentle, just enough to blend in. In a company like Verelia, noise was currency. Silence, weaponized correctly, was power. That evening, I didn't go home. I stayed in the office past 9, long after the others had left. The cleaning crew passed by my door without knocking. I sat at my desk and began my version of a war room. I started with the basic 6 months' worth of email correspondence with Selma and her team at Avalon. Every message printed, organized by date, labeled by topic delivery timelines, fleet specs, warranty options. The formatting was unmistakably mine. The tone professional, detailed, human. Nothing like Mason's hollow jargon. Next came the drafts. Dozens of PDFs annotated in my handwriting, saved on my personal drive. I pulled out audio memos I'd recorded on my phone after late-night client calls, reminders to follow up. Insights from Selma, ideas I'd tested and refined before they became proposals. At the center of it all sat the crown jewel, the signed memo from Selma, the one that sealed our private consulting agreement, her signature next to mine, Avalon stamp at the bottom, and a clear line outlining the scope Verelia as vehicle supplier, not sales intermediary. My strategy, my name, my deal. The next day, I stopped by finance under the pretense of confirming delivery milestones. Saria Wong looked up from her screen as I leaned against the doorframe. "Quick question," I said casually. "Did Mason ever speak to you about Avalon? Anything at all?" She raised an eyebrow. "Mason? No. Never saw his name in the pipeline. All requests came from you. Why I smiled, just cross-checking a few internal records. She didn't press. She never did. But as I walked away, I saw her frown slightly, like she just caught the edge of something sharp. Back at my desk, I opened a new spreadsheet, one column for documents, one for witnesses, and one for the names of people who thought I wouldn't fight back. The email went out company-wide regional review, Tuesday, 9 Ozaroa, Marriott downtown, grand ballroom, a quarterly ritual, top deals, top talent, a parade of performance wrapped in catered lunches and ego. 2 hours later, during our morning huddle, Danny clapped his hands and announced, Mason will present the Avalon deal to corporate. Great learning moment for him. Let's show the region what we're made of. Applause again. Always applause. I raised my hand slightly. Could I get a copy of the presentation slides? I'd like to make sure the warranty language is aligned with the final proposal. Danny smiled like I'd asked for the crown jewels. That won't be necessary. Celeste. Mason's got it covered. Of course he did. Back at my desk, I didn't open Excel or CRM. I opened PowerPoint, built my own deck from scratch, slide by slide, bullet by bullet, evidence layered with elegance. The first slide bore the Avalon logo. The second, a screenshot of Selma's signature on our agreement. Then call logs, pricing matrices, photos from in-person fleet tours. Every pixel traced back to me. That evening, I sent Selma a short, polite message. Hi, Selma, for internal compliance. Could you send a quick statement confirming I was the primary contact on the Avalon negotiations, just tightening up files ahead of regional reporting? Appreciated always. Celeste. She replied within the hour. Celeste, of course. You were our sole point of contact. Always. Let me know if corporate needs direct confirmation. Selma. I stared at her words for a long time, not because I doubted them, but because I knew what they would cost someone else. By Friday, my folder was complete, paper and digital, clean, sharp, undeniable. On Monday, I ironed my blazer and packed 2 USB drives, one for the projector, one for backup, just in case. They'd given Mason the spotlight. I was bringing the truth to the stage. Mason opened with a grin and a slide that read, Strategic Rapport, a new approach to fleet alignment. He spoke like a man who believed his own script. The key to Avalon's integration wasn't just logistics, he said. It was relationship scaffolding, trust engineering, cross-alignment strategies tailored for executive continuity. I counted 4 buzzwords in one sentence. Marvin Tierney, the regional director, scribbled something on his notepad. I waited. Mason clicked to the next slide fleet specs I'd built, presented now in a font I wouldn't have chosen, colored in shades of someone else's ego. He talked about decision-maker profiles and executive engagement metrics, not one mention of a single meeting, not one anecdote grounded in reality. He was 12 minutes in when I stood. May I supplement the record heads turned? Mason froze. Marvin looked up. Go ahead. Ms. Whitmore. I walked to the podium, inserted my USB, and opened my presentation. First slide, Selma's signed letter. Second slide, 6-month email thread. Subject lines visible. Timestamps aligned. Third, a spreadsheet of all call logs, 42 calls. Over 30 hours, all from my extension. Fourth, a signed memo from Carlos, Avalon's fleet director, stating Celeste Whitmore was our sole point of contact throughout the negotiation process. I clicked once more. Fifth slide, an internal email from Danny Vaughn to Mason Hale. Shadow Celeste on Avalon. Loop in lightly. We'll position you as support to show board value. The room didn't move. Mason shifted in his seat. Danny, sitting 2 rows back, turned the color of damp chalk. Someone coughed. Another executive leaned forward, squinting at the screen like he wasn't sure he read it right. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I simply clicked through the rest photos of the site visit, annotated drafts in my handwriting, and finally, the unsigned commission form, the one they'd expected me to swallow without question. I stepped back from the projector. "This is the record," I said, unedited, unspun. The screen behind me stayed frozen on Danny's email as I returned to my seat. Danny started to speak, but no words came out, just a dry click in his throat. Mason wiped his forehead with a napkin he'd taken from the coffee cart earlier, now wrinkled and damp in his trembling hand. Marvin Tierney closed his notebook slowly and looked at Danny with a flat, measured stare. "You threatened her job," he said. Voice quiet but sharp. To protect a false narrative, Danny tried again. "It wasn't like that." "Then explain," Marvin said. "Explain how an intern with no client access and no documentation was listed as strategic lead on the biggest fleet deal in our region." Silence. One of the other executives leaned in. "We reviewed those call logs. Mason's extension shows 0 calls to Avalon. None." Another chimed in. "And if you falsified commission reports, that's not mentorship. That's liability." Mason stood abruptly. "Look, I was just doing what I was told Danny said to learn from her, but he said to make sure my name was in the file. I didn't mean a staffer approached the table and whispered something to Marvin." He nodded. "Mason Hale," Marvin said. "Please step outside. HR will join you momentarily." Mason hesitated, eyes darting to Danny, then to me. I didn't move. He picked up his folder and left, flanked by silence. Marvin turned to Danny. "Your position is no longer tenable. You'll be relieved of duty immediately. Security will accompany you to collect your belongings." Danny didn't argue. He just sat there, deflated. 7 years of undermining me collapsed in 7 minutes. When the room settled, Marvin turned to me. His tone changed, less cold, more deliberate. "Ms. Whitmore, you will receive your full $280,000 commission," he said, "plus a $40,000 performance bonus for exceeding regional targets." I nodded once. No smile, just breath. Then he leaned closer. "Avalon's launching a new tech fleet division next quarter. They're looking for senior partners with on-the-ground intelligence and proven results. It comes with equity." I looked at him fully for the first time all morning. "I'd like to discuss that," I said. He extended a hand. I shook it. The wheel was turning, and this time, I wasn't just along for the ride. 3 months later, I stepped into my new office at Avalon Fleet Tech HQ. Real wood floors, matte black glass, and silence that hummed with focus instead of fear. My name wasn't on a door plate, it was on the letterhead. Celeste Whitmore, Senior Strategy Partner, Equity Holder. No commission splits, no approval chains, just ownership. Carlos had transferred the Avalon account to me without hesitation. 2 other clients, both corporate fleets I'd once handled quietly at Veralia, followed within weeks. Loyalty didn't follow titles, it followed trust. I no longer tracked calls or counted my hours. I scheduled meetings at times that worked for me, trained new account teams, rewrote onboarding templates that still bore Mason's buzzwords. Every idea I floated was discussed. Every result was credited. When something worked, it had my name on it. When it didn't, it still did, and that was the difference. On a gray Tuesday morning, between quarterly reports and a new pitch deck for a logistics startup in Denver, I took a detour back to Veralia. The showroom looked smaller, glossier, hollow. A single salesperson stood at the desk, half-heartedly rearranging brochures. I kept my sunglasses on. No Mason, no Danny. Word was they'd both landed elsewhere, one rehired by a cousin's chain in Atlanta, the other consulting, which usually meant waiting for something to happen. I approached the front desk and set down a small white envelope. For your records, I said, inside the unsigned commission form, still folded, still unmarked, alongside it, a single note in ink, you can keep the paper. I kept the power. The receptionist blinked. Should I forward this? I smiled. No need. Then I turned and walked out. The world outside felt heavier in the best way. More mine. They had tried to write me out of my own story. They'd called me support, background, the fine print. But they were wrong. They gave him my spotlight. I bought the damn stage.